We're moving in Friday, my sister announced via text message. Mom already agreed. No greeting, no explanation, no question. Just a statement. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. The words felt unreal, like someone had typed them as a joke. Moving in? Into my house? The house I bought. The house I paid for. The house I protected. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't reply. Instead, I stood up slowly and walked toward the front window. The late afternoon light spilled across the quiet street outside. Everything looked normal, peaceful, safe. But something inside me shifted. I grabbed my phone again, not to respond, but to open my security app. Alarm system, armed. Doorbell camera, recording. Backyard motion sensors, active. I zoomed in on the live feed of my front porch. Empty, clean, undisturbed. And yet the message echoed in my head. Mom already agreed. That part hit harder than the rest. I hadn't spoken to Mom about this, not once. No discussion, no warning, no, how would you feel? Just decided. It was typical. Growing up, my sister never asked for permission. She assumed it, and somehow the world adjusted around her. I called Mom. She picked up on the third ring. "Hi, sweetheart." "Did you tell her she could move into my house?" I asked, skipping pleasantries. There was a pause. A small, uncomfortable one. "Well," she began carefully, "she's going through a hard time. You know that." That wasn't my question. Another pause. "She said you wouldn't mind." I let out a quiet laugh, not amused, not surprised either. "She said that," I repeated. "She has the kids," Mom added softly, as if that explained everything. And there it was, the guilt card. I closed my eyes and leaned against the wall. My house took years of overtime shifts, sleepless nights, and sacrifice. While my sister jumped between jobs and fresh starts, I built stability. But somehow, I was the selfish one for hesitating? "I need to think," I said. "Don't make this difficult," Mom replied gently. "Family helps family." Family. The word felt heavy. After the call ended, I walked through my house slowly. The living room, the kitchen, the hallway, my office, the guest room, currently empty. Was that what she saw when she thought about my home? An opportunity? I sat down at the kitchen table and reread the message. "We're moving in Friday." Not can we, not would it be okay, not even please, just certainty. My phone buzzed again. Another text. "Don't worry, we won't be in your way." I stared at that sentence for a long moment. That's what people say before they absolutely get in your way. I typed back finally. "How long?" 3 dots appeared almost instantly. "Just until I get back on my feet." No timeline, no plan. I had heard that before. In college, when she temporarily borrowed money and never repaid it. When she temporarily stayed at a friend's place and left them with unpaid bills. Temporary was her favorite word. It stretched like elastic. My phone suddenly lit up with a notification from my security system. Front yard motion detected. My heart skipped. I opened the live feed. A delivery truck pulling away. I exhaled, slow-eyed. I hadn't realized how tense I'd become. That's when it hit me this wasn't about space. It was about control. She had already decided, Mom had already agreed, and now I was the final obstacle to overcome. I stood and walked to the hallway closet, opening the panel to check the backup battery for the alarm system, fully charged. I checked the door locks manually, even though I knew they were fine. Then my phone buzzed again. This time, not a text, a notification. Doorbell camera online, recording. I tapped into it again, watching the quiet porch in real time. For most people, a message like that would cause panic. For me, it triggered preparation. If she was coming Friday, I needed boundaries before then. Clear ones, written ones. Because once someone crosses into your space without asking, they rarely stop at the doorway. I typed one final message. We need to talk before Friday. The reply came quickly. Why are you being like this? I stared at that sentence for a long time. Being like what? Careful? Protective? Responsible? Or simply unwilling to surrender my home without a conversation? Outside, the sky had started turning orange as evening settled in. Inside, something else settled too. Resolve. If she moved in, it would not be without rules. And if she ignored them, well, that's why the alarm system was armed and the cameras were recording. Friday was 3 days away. 3 days to prepare. 3 days to decide whether I was opening my home or surrendering it. The next morning, my sister called instead of texting. That alone told me she sensed resistance. I let it ring twice before answering. Why are you making this a big deal? She asked immediately. No hello, no warmth, just irritation. I'm not, I replied calmly. I'm asking questions. It's temporary, she said. You have space. The guest room is empty. So she had already mapped out my house in her head. How long is temporary? I asked again. A sigh. Dramatic. Sharp. Why do you need a timeline? I just told you I'm getting back on my feet. With what job? I asked. Silence. I have interviews lined up. How many? Another pause. A few. That wasn't an answer. I walked into my office and closed the door. I need specifics. If you're moving in, we're setting clear rules. She laughed under her breath. Rules? I'm your sister. Yes, I said evenly, and this is my house. That shifted the tone instantly. So now you're throwing ownership in my face? I worked for it. And I didn't? She snapped. I didn't respond to that. Arguing about the past would derail the present. Instead, I kept my voice steady. You can stay for 30 days. 30? She repeated, offended. That's nothing. It's a month. Plenty of time to find work and an apartment. And if I can't, then we reassess, together, before the 30 days end. She went quiet. I could hear her breathing through the phone. You're acting like I'm some stranger, she said finally. No, I replied. I'm acting like someone who doesn't want resentment to grow. That landed. Because resentment had grown before, in small, quiet ways. Money borrowed, favors extended, promises broken. I wasn't angry about the past anymore, but I wasn't blind either. There will be other conditions, I continued. She made a frustrated sound. Unbelievable. Contribution to groceries, I said, ignoring the comment. Shared chores, no surprise guests, and you talk to me before making any changes to the house. What changes would I make? I don't know. Rearranging furniture, inviting people over, using my office. I wouldn't touch your precious office, she muttered. It's not about precious. It's about boundaries. The word hung in the air. Boundaries. Growing up, that word didn't exist in our house. Everything was shared. Space, privacy, responsibility. And when lines blurred, feelings did too. I can't believe you don't trust me, she said. Trust. There it was. I trust you, I answered carefully. I just trust clarity more. Another long silence. Then she switched tactics. The kids are excited, she said softly. They miss you. And there it was again, the guilt card. I leaned back in my chair. This isn't about the kids. They need stability right now. So do I. That surprised her. I could hear it in the sudden quiet. "You're fine," she said. "You don't know that." I rarely talked about my stress, the overtime, the pressure, the exhaustion of being the stable one everyone relied on. But stability doesn't mean invincible. "I built this place to feel safe," I said quietly. "I need it to stay that way." Her voice softened slightly. "You think I'm going to destroy your peace?" "I think," I said slowly, "that if we don't define expectations, we'll hurt each other." That was the truth. Not anger, not rejection, prevention. She exhaled deeply. 30 days, she said at last. Groceries and chores. No random guests. And communication. If something changes, we talk first. Fine. But it didn't sound fine. It sounded tight, reluctant. After we hung up, I sat there staring at my dark computer screen, seeing my reflection faintly in it. Was I being too rigid or finally responsible? My phone buzzed again. A group chat notification. Mom had added herself. "I'm glad you two worked it out. Family is everything." Worked it out. That was generous phrasing. I typed nothing. Instead, I opened my security app again. Everything normal. All systems active. Then I opened a notes app and began typing something else. Move-in date, Friday, 5 p.m. Agreement, 30 days. Financial contribution, shared groceries. Chores, weekly rotation. No guests without approval. No changes to house setup. Weekly check-in conversation. If this was happening, it would be documented, clear, structured. I printed the list and placed it on the kitchen counter. Not dramatic, not hostile, just visible. That evening, I walked through the guest room and stood in the doorway. The bed was neatly made, the closet empty, the space quiet. In 3 days, that quiet would change. I wasn't afraid of noise. I was afraid of erosion. Because homes don't usually collapse all at once. They weaken slowly. Through ignored boundaries, through unspoken frustrations, through small compromises that pile up until one day you don't recognize your own space. Friday was coming, and I had a feeling this wasn't just about someone moving in. It was about whether I could hold my ground once they did. They were late. Not by much. 3 minutes past 5. But I noticed. At exactly 5:03 p.m., my phone buzzed. Front door motion detected. I didn't rush to the door. I watched the live feed first. My sister stood on the porch, one hand on her hip, the other holding her phone. 2 suitcases sat beside her. The kids hovered near the steps, restless. Behind them, her car was packed so tightly the back window was barely visible. That wasn't temporary. That was relocation. I opened the door slowly. "Hey," she said, forcing brightness into her voice. The kids ran past me immediately, their shoes thudding against my hardwood floors. "Shoes off," I called calmly. They paused, looked at their mom. She hesitated half a second too long. "Shoes off," she repeated to them. "Good. Small test. Passed." She stepped inside and looked around like she was seeing the house for the first time, even though she'd visited before. "It's bigger than I remember," she said. "It's the same size," I replied. Her eyes landed on the paper sitting neatly on the kitchen counter. The agreement. She walked toward it slowly. "You printed it?" she asked. "Yes." She picked it up and scanned it quickly, jaw tightening just slightly. "You don't trust verbal agreements?" "I trust clarity." The kids' voices echoed down the hallway as they explored. I followed the sound and found them opening doors. Guest room is yours, I said firmly. Other rooms stay closed. They're just looking, my sister said, and I'm just being clear. Another small test. She walked down the hallway and gently redirected them into the guest room. This is our space, she told them. Better. I returned to the living room and watched as she brought in more bags, and more, and more. 3 trips turned into 5. 5 turned into 8. Boxes labeled kitchen, a folded desk, a standing lamp, a storage bin marked winter clothes. I folded my arms. You're not redecorating. I'm not, she said defensively. It's just our stuff. Your stuff fits in the guest room. Her lips pressed into a thin line. We need some storage space. There's room under the bed. For 3 people? For 30 days. There it was again. 30 days. She stood still for a moment, then nodded tightly, and began carrying 2 boxes back to her car. She wasn't happy, but she wasn't arguing either. That mattered. By 6:30 p.m., the house felt different. Fuller. Louder. Occupied. The kids sat at my dining table eating pizza we'd ordered, their voices overlapping as they talked about school and friends and how cool my TV was. I watched them carefully. They weren't the problem. They were just kids caught in adult decisions. My sister leaned against the kitchen counter, scrolling her phone. "Wi-Fi password?" she asked casually. I hesitated. Another boundary. I told her, but I made a mental note to monitor device connections later. After dinner, I gathered everyone in the living room. "Quick house talk," I said. She rolled her eyes slightly, but sat down. "Quiet hours start at 10 p.m. Kitchen cleaned after use. Laundry days need to be scheduled." "We're not in boot camp," she muttered. "No," I agreed calmly. "We're in my house." The kids glanced between us. She forced a smile. "It's fine." I handed her a pen. "Sign it." Her head snapped up. "Seriously?" "Yes. It's family. And it's my home." The silence stretched longer this time. Finally, with visible reluctance, she signed the paper. I signed it too. Then I took a picture of it with my phone. Documentation. Security wasn't just cameras and alarms. It was records. That night, around 9:45 p.m., I walked through the hallway. Guest room door closed, light on underneath. Muffled voices. Normal. I checked my security app. Back door locked, window secured, all systems active. But just as I set my phone down on the nightstand, it buzzed again. New device connected to network. I frowned. I hadn't added anything new. I opened a network panel. Unknown device. Not a phone, not a tablet. Something else. I got out of bed quietly and walked down the hallway. Guest room door still closed, lights still on. I knocked once. "It's open," my sister called. I stepped inside. The kids were on the bed watching a show. My sister sat at the small desk, assembling something. A small white box with wires. "What's that?" I asked. She froze for just a second. "Just a router extender," she said. "Signal's weak back here." I stared at it. "You didn't mention adding hardware. It's harmless. That's not the point." She sighed dramatically. "You're overreacting." Maybe, or maybe not. Because the thing about boundaries is the first one tested is rarely the last. I looked at the device again, then at her, and for the first time since Friday had begun, I felt something shift. Not noise, not inconvenience. Something else. Something I couldn't name yet. But my phone was still in my hand, and the alarm system was still armed. I didn't look away from the small white box on the desk. "A router extender?" I repeated. "Yes," she said, a little too quickly. This signal was weak in here. I stepped closer. It wasn't plugged into the wall like a normal extender. It sat flat on the desk, wires trailing behind it. One wire connected to a power strip. Another disappeared behind her suitcase. "That's not how extenders usually look," I said calmly. She crossed her arms. "Since when are you a tech expert?" "Since I pay for the network." The kids sensed the shift in tone. Their show volume lowered. They watched us quietly. "I'm not trying to spy on you," she said defensively. "I didn't say that. But you're acting like I planted a bomb." I picked up the device gently and turned it over. No branding. No visible company name. Just a plain casing. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "A friend." "What friend?" She hesitated. That was enough. "Unplug it," I said. Her expression hardened. "Are you serious?" "Yes." "It's just internet." "It's my internet." She stood up now. "You don't trust me at all." "This isn't about trust, it's about permission. You're controlling. And you're installing unknown hardware on a private network without asking." The air between us tightened. Finally, with an exaggerated sigh, she reached forward and unplugged the device. "Happy?" "Leave it off," I said. She dropped it into one of her bags with more force than necessary. I stepped back toward the door. "Quiet hours start in 10 minutes. "You don't have to treat us like tenants," she muttered. I paused in the doorway. "That's exactly what you are right now." Her eyes flashed, but she didn't argue. I closed the door and walked back to my room, heart beating harder than it should have. Maybe it really was harmless. Maybe I was overanalyzing. But something about the hesitation bothered me. I opened my network app again. The unknown device had disconnected. Good. Still, I changed the Wi-Fi password. If she needed it again, she could ask. At 10:30 p.m., the house was finally quiet. Too quiet. That kind of silence that feels stretched thin. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment. Why not ask first? Why act defensive? Why no brand name? Around midnight, I heard soft footsteps in the hallway. I didn't move. A faint creak. Then another. Not the sharp stomping of kids. Careful steps. Measured. I picked up my phone and opened the camera feed. Hallway camera. Active. I zoomed in. The guest room door was slightly open. A shadow moved across the frame. My sister. She walked toward the living room. I switched to the living room camera. She stood near the router. My router. I watched as she bent down beside it. My chest tightened. She pulled something from her pocket. Small, dark. She leaned closer to the router. I was already out of bed before I realized I'd moved. I opened my bedroom door quietly and stepped into the hallway. She was still crouched there when I turned the corner. "What are you doing?" I asked. She jumped. Too hard, too fast. "Nothing," she said, standing abruptly. In her hand was a small USB device. "That doesn't look like nothing. It's just, I thought maybe the signal would improve if I—" "Stop." She froze. "Step away." Her jaw tightened. "You're being ridiculous. Step away." For a second, I thought she might argue again. Instead, she slowly stepped back. I walked forward and looked at the router. She hadn't plugged anything in yet, but she had tried. I turned toward her. "Why?" Her face shifted from defensive to frustrated. "Because you control everything. You watch everything. You monitor everything. It's suffocating. This is my home. And we're guests. I get it. You've made that clear. Then respect it." Her eyes glistened slightly, but not with sadness, with anger. "I just wanted better internet," she said. "At midnight?" She didn't answer. The silence said enough. I picked up the small USB device from where she dropped it during our confrontation. No label. No brand. Again. Where did you get this? She looked away. Answer me. A friend, she repeated weakly. Same answer, same vagueness. I stared at her for a long moment. Then I said, You have two options. You hand me every device you brought that connects to my network, or you leave. Her eyes widened. You wouldn't. I would. The kids were asleep down the hallway. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't emotional. Just firm. She studied my face, searching for doubt. She didn't find any. Slowly, reluctantly, she walked back to the guest room. A minute later, she returned with the white box and another small device. She placed them in my hands without speaking. 30 days, I reminded her quietly. Don't make it 30 hours. She walked past me without responding and closed the guest room door. I stood alone in the living room, the small devices heavy in my palm. Maybe she was telling the truth. Maybe it was just about signal strength. But something doesn't tighten for no reason. And as I unplugged the router completely and reset it from factory settings, I realized something unsettling. This wasn't just about space anymore. It was about secrets. I didn't sleep. After resetting the router, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and the two devices beside it. I wasn't a cybersecurity expert, but I knew enough. The white box wasn't a simple extender. A quick offline diagnostic scan showed it had internal storage, data logs. That made my stomach turn. Why would a signal booster need storage? I plugged it into my laptop, carefully, without connecting it to the internet. Folders appeared. Encrypted files, timestamps, some from tonight, some from earlier in the evening, while we were eating dinner, while the kids were laughing, while she said everything was fine. I checked the hallway camera footage again. There it was. At 8:12 p.m., while I was in the kitchen, she had stepped into my office, just for 30 seconds, empty-handed going in, carrying something small coming out. My chest tightened. I walked quietly to my office and opened the door. At first glance, everything looked normal. Desk, monitor, files. Then I saw it. Behind my computer tower, a tiny black device plugged into a USB port. My pulse slammed. I unplugged it immediately. Cold. Recently used. She hadn't been improving internet. She had been copying something. Data. But what and why? Section 6. The truth cracks. At 6:45 a.m., I knocked on the guest room door. No anger, just clarity. She opened it, eyes tired but guarded. We need to talk, I said. The kids were still asleep. I held up the small black USB device. Her face drained of color. You went into my office. You installed this. Silence. Then denial. I don't know what that is. Don't. Her shoulders sagged slightly. It's not what you think, she whispered. Then explain it. Tears welled in her eyes, but they felt strategic, not broken. I just needed information. What information? She hesitated, then finally said it. Your financial records. The air shifted. You tried to steal my data. I wasn't stealing, she snapped quietly. I just needed proof. Proof of what? You have savings, she said, voice shaking now. You're stable, you're fine. I just needed to show Mom that you could afford to support us longer. There it was. Not desperation, strategy. I looked at her for a long moment. You're leaving, I said calmly. Her eyes widened. Today. And for the first time since Friday, she had no argument left.